right. Hello, everybody. Excited to be here. Thank you very much for the invitation. This was a real honor to be able to come back to Iowa State, come back to my alma mater, and especially to talk to a group as diverse as this. We've heard from just absolutely wonderful people today. And so hopefully we finish out today with myself and the last little bit of conversation here. I was thinking long and hard about what to present to this group, to the point where I actually called Matt and I said, Matt, what am I supposed to do here? And he kind of gave some background on what the Symposium committee was looking for, what might be of interest, and I thought, okay, I have an idea of where I want to go. So I'm going to talk about collecting the dots and then connecting the dots, and then how, as a commercial plant breeder, you use to breed for new product concepts. And so now, just a little disclaimer before we start. I'm a commercial plant breeder. I've always been located in North America, so you're going to see a lot of that kind of context with it. So, you know, my perception, your mileage may vary in your job. And I thought long and hard about how I wanted to kick this off. And I thought, you know, let's start with donuts, because it's plant breeding talk. How many of you here have ever been to St. Louis, Missouri? Okay. Has anybody when you stop by St. Louis, have you ever been to Strange Donuts? Anybody? No? Strange Donuts, you get things like this. So being the good Gen Xer that I am, I was driving home from work one day listening to a podcast, and it was about the owner of Strange Donuts, a guy named Jason Bachman, and the podcast happened to be the Vance Crow podcast. And they were talking about at Strange Donuts, they have less than 2% employee turnover. And in the service industry, that is remarkably low. They were saying normal industry turnover rates are something almost at 100%. And so they were in this whole conversation about employee retention, and Jason was talking about it's really about getting to know your employees. And he said it's about knowing 3 things that are important to them. And he talked about this idea of collecting the dots, and then when you connect them, that allows you to make those connections with people. And I thought, well, that's actually what we do as plant breeders, right? We find interesting bits of science over here in phenomics, genomics, some sort of new field plot type of thing, new type of breeding strategy. And we're always collecting these interesting pieces of information. And then as plant breeders, our job is really to tie all of that in together into a strategy. So I thought, cool, this is, you know, as plant breeders, that's what we do. We collect things, collect interesting ideas, and honestly, collect interesting people in your network. And then we connect all of that together to answer questions for farmers. And I was feeling really good about this. And I thought, this is what I'm going to talk about. And then I was at a rep sales conference 2 weeks ago in Canada. And somebody flipped this up on the slide. Ladies and gentlemen, this is how your major professor control you from years ago and didn't even realize it. Like, this is from Walt's book in 1987. And if you read that quote, it's talking about cultivar development, application of knowledge by a number of scientific disciplines. And plant breeders, their ability to integrate them into an effective program. And I thought, shoot, I had thought I had really hit on something really key here. And here Walt had written about it back in 1987. But concept remains. So this is what we're going to talk about today. So commercial plant breeder, we talk about products and product concepts. And this is what it looks like for us. This is what your finished product concept looks like when you're driving down the road. I work for Corteva, so it's going to be a Pioneer sign. It could be a DeKalb sign, whatever. And this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like when 5, 8, 10, 15 years of hard work come together, and all of that information that you've been collecting, you've put into a forward motion. This finished product. And the cool part about that then is a farmer has thought enough of your finished product idea to plant it on their acre. So that is what the finished kind of product concept, that's what it looks like. That's what I'm going to be talking about today. Now, if you are a tree breeder, I'm going to talk about things in a 5, 8, 10-year context. Tree breeders, oh man, that is taking a life's work along a lot farther out. So my customer is the farmer. And I thought we'd talk just for really quickly when thinking about customers, thinking about what they look like. And so I was obviously drafting this up in Microsoft PowerPoint. So I said, Microsoft PowerPoint, give me a picture of a farmer. This is what it gave me. Oh my gosh. You see our stereotypical farmer icon here? Wearing a straw hat, has bibs on, holding a pitchfork upside down, like pointy part in your head, right? I have met thousands of farmers in my career. I have met them wearing straw hats. I've met them wearing bibs. I've met them holding a pitchfork, and I have yet to ever see that stereotype be the actual farmer, okay? I'm going to show you some pictures of what an actual farmer looks like day to day right now. My dad is almost 70 years old. Flip phone, okay? That's Dad's level of technology. This is the inside of Dad's cab. This is the inside of his combine. You can see my almost 70-year-old father, he has 1, 2, 3, 4 monitors on one side of his cab. He has a flip phone. He couldn't take the whole picture of the cab, just one side of the cab, right? So this is old school technology at this point. Dad's had this combine for almost 20 years. Okay? For those of you on Twitter, it's always interesting when you put a call out to your Twitter network, like, hey, I'm looking for a picture of the inside of a cab of a planter. And a guy on my Twitter network named Jared McDaniel sent me this picture. This is the inside of his planting cab. You can look at the number of screens that he has there, and my favorite part, because he has GPS for steering, he has Netflix running on one side, right? And I don't know Jared like in person, but judging from what he posts, I would say he's probably about my age, probably about mid-career farmer. So this is our customer right now. Again, I work for a large multinational company. I breed in the Midwest. This is my customer. This is what we're looking at right now. So that's what we think of as our ultimate customer, the person kind of at the end. But for me, I actually have an intermediate customer. My actual immediate customer is the sales force. Research does not advance the final 2 years, at least in Corteva. They don't advance varieties to be named, to be sold to farmers. That's our sales force. So our sales force is actually the one that makes the decision those last 2 years, what advances out. They rely on research, obviously, for input, and we generate a lot of data for that to happen. But my customer is actually the sales force. And John Profiter on Twitter, because who doesn't love that handle? This is some pictures. We were out at a field day in Nebraska, anyhow. So this is a combination of sales reps and farmers that I was talking to that day. But that's how that feedback loop starts with knowing what to breed. So with kind of the concepts that have been presented today, I'm going to talk about, again, collecting and connecting dots. But you need to know where you're going as you're connecting those dots. And for me, this is how that's how that feedback loop starts. And a lot of times it's a lot more entertaining if it starts out in the field. This too, I put the call out and I got this picture. I was actually at this field day. This was also in Nebraska. And so you'll see, herbicide traits are not something super entertaining, like from a genetic standpoint. Goodness, in some areas of the world, they are needed. So you're going to see them pop up, even though it's not the most entertaining thing to talk about, but they are needed. And because not only did the Corteva sales team respond, they do the same thing at Asgrow. I got this too from one of my friends that works for Asgrow, or works for Bayer now. So, okay, so that's kind of the feedback loop. And if you want to conceptualize what that looks like, at the very top, you kind of have groups of farmers. Okay, and they give their feedback to their sales rep. And then groups of sales rep give their feedback to an agronomist, and then I work with the agronomist. So when I was breeding soybeans at Dallas Center, I was responsible for the southern half of Iowa, the northern part of Missouri, eastern part of Nebraska, some of Illinois. There's no way I could get out and chat with all those farmers. So that's why this kind of feedback loop is put in place. So it's kind of cleared up. And then working with those agronomists. So you can imagine you're starting to think about what pieces do you need to put in place for breeding. You're getting all this feedback. In my first year, this is what it felt like. Like, oh my gosh, They are asking for insects. They're asking for soybeans to be tall enough that they can withstand drought. Not too tall, though. You don't want them to lodge. And they needed to withstand drought, but they needed to be able to withstand huge rain events. They needed to have some herbicide tolerance and just all this type of stuff, right? So my first year or two, honestly, as I was trying to think about what to do and like how to structure things going out, it was a little overwhelming. But, you know, you start to think about it, you start to work through it, the big things kind of float to the top. And my favorite types of things is on here. Somewhere it should say racehorse. What's that? Yeah, yep, white for corn. Yeah, that's where racehorse is, thank you. Does anybody, so if an agronomist comes to you and says, I need racehorse variety, do you know what that means? I had no idea what that meant. And so we got into a conversation about what is a racehorse variety? And he said, well, it's the opposite of a tough variety. Okay, I need more help. So in this particular agronomist definition, a racehorse was, he said, if you equate it to like a vehicle, he said, it's like that Ferrari, that Lamborghini. You give it the absolute best care, you keep it in the garage overnight, you know, you do everything possible to give that the best existence in the world. Something that is nothing but top end speed and yield. Like, okay, all right, now I understand what racehorse means. I said, talk to me about tough. And he said, well, tough, vehicle context. He's from Southwest Iowa. He goes, well, Jess, it's like farm truck. He goes, it's not your new farm truck, it's your old farm truck. And it's the old farm truck that has the crank windows. And one of the cranks broke on the window and you have to put a vice grips on it to crank it up. And when you're out checking calves, if you need to put a calf in the back seat to take them in to warm them up, that's how tough of a farm truck. I'm like, okay. So what he meant by that was standability, disease, and drought. But yeah, so it takes some interpretation. And as you're working through the interpretation, this is kind of what it ends up being. This was a comment that I got from Drew Porter, who's one of our global platform leads for wheat. Drew's the guy that controls my budget. He said, a product concept is that distinct product type that a farmer needs on their operation to fit a specific need. And then he's a business guy, built on a business case. So that's where we're going with this whole talk. So say you're a wheat breeder and you're a wheat breeder in the US. If you're a wheat breeder, you can actually work on 6 different kinds of wheat. You can work on hard red winter wheat, hard red spring wheat, soft red winter, soft white winter, hard white winter, and durum. So to do that, if you're told to be a wheat breeder, you need to start narrowing that down. First way you narrow that down is based on geography. So if you're a wheat breeder for Corteva and you happen to be located in Windfall, Indiana, you are breeding soft red winter wheat. Okay, that's how you start to build that product concept. We talked about some of the things that are important to farmers. Let's not forget about some of our end users. Until I started with wheat, I did not realize that loaf volume, that's a selection trait. Did everybody know that? I didn't know that. Loaf volume and cookie spread, they are 2 actual traits. If you look in our database for wheat, those are 2 traits. See some of the different expectations for the different classes of wheat, depending on if you're a hard red spring, say in North Dakota, your hard red winter in Kansas, or soft red winter in Indiana. So beyond what you're getting feedback from the agronomist, it's keeping that final end user in mind as well. And in this case, for us, it's the milling industry. Okay, so now you're a breeder and you're in Windfall, Indiana, you're working on soft red winter wheat, you have your defined, you have your end use traits defined. There's also about 5 product concepts based on geography within your own program. And so you can see they are covering from Ontario and Wisconsin clear on down to southern part of Georgia. And so that's where you start defining within your program, this is kind of that year over year product concept type of thing. This is what you're looking at. And so you're doing this for a couple of years, you're feeling pretty good, and then something new pops up. Maybe it's a new disease or a new pest or a new trait that's needed by the milling industry, and you get the phone call, and the phone call is, Jess, I got a problem. And so I work with fabulous agronomists. I've been really blessed, actually. And for them to call and say, Jess, I got a problem, is the equivalent of them standing on the pickup with a bullhorn and like a flashing red siren going off. Jess, I got a problem. And I said, well, what do you got going on? He goes, you're not going to believe me if I tell you, I think I got little orange worms eating my beans. You have what? Like, I've been a soybean breeder for almost 15 years. What do you mean you have little orange worms eating your beans? He goes, I really think I got little orange worms eating my beans. He goes, you better come look at this. So I went up to look, and you know what I found? He had little orange worms eating his beans. Cool thing about this, we didn't know what that insect was. It's something that has since been identified as soybean gall midge. But at the time, we didn't know that insect existed. We didn't know if it was the primary insect that was causing the problem. Maybe it was a secondary type of thing. And so just getting started with what your new issue is, that's what I'm going to spend the next couple of slides talking about. So you have something new. You've gotten a phone call, and it says, I got a problem, or you see something coming in the industry that you know you need to address. So how do you start, right? In this case, we didn't know if this was the primary pest. We didn't know what the name of this thing was. We didn't know, was it going to stay little orange worms, or were the little orange worms up and fly away? We had no idea. So things that you need to put together. So some of those dots that you need to be collecting. As plant breeders, a lot of times we think about our strategy. It is based on genotype, the genetics, and it's based on the phenotype. And then we are all really great plant breeders. We'll tie those two things together into a strategy, into that great idea in the middle, and we are just going to rock and roll through this new problem. And I would argue that we're missing a couple of dots. The first one is the people. So today is a really great example. As you're collecting interesting pieces of science or interesting bits of information that you think could be useful, start collecting interesting people in your network. There are people out there that love statistics, love machine learning. I am not one of them. Oh my goodness, I will fall asleep. Please don't talk to me about that. Please, please, please. However, it's very important to my job. So I have collected those types of people into my network, right? Because for a company, there's also a business case. They're always interested, what's this going to cost, how much time, all that type of stuff. Don't ignore that. It's just not the most interesting part. Data and data access. So like in the case before, we saw little orange worms. What do we measure? What's my data point? Is it dead plants? Is it the number of little orange worms? Is it how fast little orange worms grow up to be big orange worms? You know, like what are we measuring here? And then culture. Plant breeders, even at our absolute fastest, say we're just, multiple cycles per year, we're just nailing through this kind of stuff, we're not going to get anything done for the next 5 to 8 years. That's as fast as we're going to go, right? So keep in the long game of new things that might be popping up in culture, in farming culture, in new types of phenomics that are coming out there. So just kind of keep that long game in mind as well. I'm going to spend a couple minutes. We're going to talk about each one of these dots and kind of a couple ideas around them. One other thing that I was going to talk about is kind of that dot scale and deployment. So I swear guys, this is going to be my only like Corteva's cool slide. This is it. This is my Corteva's cool slide. You knew there had to be one, okay? But the way things operate at Corteva, and I would assume in a lot of other places, I've only ever worked there. So we have one global crop team. We're scattered all around the world. But the cool thing is that we are scattered all around the world. So we have groups driving local product development. And what that means is we have research centers all over the place. So whatever new idea is out there, you can be those ideas are flowing in. And whenever you need data, you can put that request and then send it out. So leveraging that kind of network is really, really cool. And especially when we're thinking about driving phenotyping excellence and process efficiency. So I showed the soft red winter region. Those breeders in Windfall, Indiana, they are responsible for the entire eastern half of the US. There is no way they are going to drive all the eastern half of the US and plant all those plots. Well, they could. They'd probably quit on me though. So what we're going to do instead is we have corn breeding centers and soybean breeding centers scattered in those areas. So we can send them packets and send them seed. And then they can, grow those trials and send things back in. My obligatory platform slide. So when we're thinking about new things, the business is always interested in how much time, how much money, where in the world do you think this is going to be an impact? So that is one of the things. the people. Has anybody in here heard of Shonda Rhimes? She's a TV writer. Yes, my favorite quote of hers is gather your people. And as plant breeders, this is what we need to do. We need to gather our people. Those people in your network, somebody out there is gonna love statistics or deep learning, phenotyping, drones. Somebody out there is gonna love that. Get to know that person. They are gonna be super helpful. In this particular picture, we were standing in a wheat field, I think in Eastern Illinois, don't quote me on that. And these are my people that I happened to have out there that day. I had Cristiano in the orange hat. He was a new breeder with us. He had been there about 3 months at that point. I had Bill kind of in the dark hat with the suspenders. He was our experienced breeder. He'd been doing that for 35 years. Want to talk about wheat? Goodness, Bill will talk about wheat till your ears fall off. Love that about him, but just be warned if you're going to get in a car. So in the pink hat, Marissa, she's a reproductive biologist. And then Rajat's kind of in the blue shirt with a darker hat there, and he's a discovery scientist. Plant breeders, really, it's about tying that different parts of information together. Not only your tools, but think about your people. What kind of people can you tie together to help you answer your questions, build your products and strategy? And then, so back to that phenotyping example, I got that phone call. Jess, I got little orange worms eating my beans. And so I made a decision flow chart there, phenotyping. Question number 1, do I actually know what to measure? The answer can be yes or no, right? A lot of times it's no. Let's go down the far side then. So then the obvious question, does someone else know what to measure? If yes, go talk to them, right? I know this seems really obvious, but there is no reason to try and solve a problem just by yourself. Go talk to people. However, if you go and talk to someone else and know they don't know, this is where it gets kind of interesting because you fall into this box of you have to get really creative, do your research, leverage your network. Hopefully somebody knows what's going on. So maybe when you get to your new problem and you can go down the other side there, do I know what to measure? Maybe the answer is yes, okay? That's awesome. Next, do you have the right tools? And again, this is where the flow chart kind of starts to split off for me at least a little bit. And if the answer is yes, you are one lucky person, go collect your data. That's perfect, that's awesome. A lot of times the answer is no, I know what to measure, but I don't have the right tool. And then the obvious question is, does someone else? If the answer is yes, that's awesome, leverage your tool, go collect the data. If the answer is no, you're back into that get creative, do some research, leverage your network, go talk to some people box. A lot of times, especially at Corteva, from what I've noticed, is you know what to measure. You think, do I have the right tools? And you fall in this little green, maybe I do. I'm not really sure. I think I need to modify it. And if I modify it, then I can go and collect that data. And for us, one of the tools that we've been using a lot in this maybe and modify has been drones. So I know we heard an excellent talk over lunch about drones with Progeny. So this isn't going to be anything super new. But for us, the drone, and this is all for above ground, my apologies to my below ground colleagues. But above ground for us, being able to put different sensors and cameras on there is really, really powerful. And that big phenotyping tool that we've used in the past couple of years, probably since like 2011, 2012, it's been our thing that we've been working on. However, with drones, this is still where you can get into that modify part. So a drone is great because it will fly up and take a great picture. This is not data though, this is just a really nice picture. Happens to be a really nice picture of a soybean field. It's just a really nice picture. And so getting to know folks who are really involved in algorithms, some of the mechanics needed to turn that picture into a number, turn that number into an association with that plot, that has been absolutely helpful. Again, I'm not that person. I'm not even a drone pilot. Get to know your folks. So if you got your phenotype, now you need your genotype, of course. And for us, you know, genotyping when I was in grad school, that was actually a really big thing. Our biggest constraint at that time was genotyping. And we did things like 96 samples at a time, and we were big stuff. And when we ran our PCR, about, I don't know, probably 30, 40% of the time it failed. We didn't really know why, because it was, it was on like this single block type of thing, right? So our genotyping has kind of stopped being that limitation, and now a lot of it's that phenotyping or knowing what to measure. So I don't want to blow past this because it is still really important and obviously something that goes into your game plan, but the genotyping, that is an interesting part, but not one that needs a whole lot of explanation right now, I don't think. But data and data access. So now you say you've flown something with the drone, or you've gone out and you've dug some roots, or you've gone out and measured the size of your little orange worms. What are you going to do with that data? So data and data access have really become a really good way that we've made some improvements over time since my start with Corteva. So at the time it was Pioneer. And what is on this slide is all of our research centers, and it was a 24-hour time period, and it's a visualization of how much data those research centers were pushing out and or pulling in. And so you can see some of our research centers were obviously in a planting or harvest mode, kind of in that southern hemisphere, and the northern hemisphere was just kind of, is this as normal? But that data and data access, because maybe soybeans in North America, maybe we don't know what soybean gall midge is about, but maybe there's a gall midge in alfalfa. Maybe there is something like that in rice. And by having everyone on a shared platform, we have like just different applications where you can go in and do that search and pull that type of information out. And so even though I might not have the data I need to do the initial experiment, someone else might. And so when I started, everybody had their own like local server. That's not helpful, at least in this kind of context. When we kind of moved everyone where that data became a lot more accessible, that's when we really start to see a lot of that gain come on. And then the culture part. So as you're thinking about this, just be thinking, what's out there that might be interesting? Maybe as a plant breeder, maybe you don't need to solve that through genetics. Maybe it's through a crop protection thing. Maybe that's how they solve it for the next few years. Maybe it's through different equipment. Or maybe, honestly, it's something that you can look up on YouTube. Somebody else has dealt with. You can use that kind of thing. So that's the culture part. So just like I said, thinking about collecting the dots and connecting the dots, don't be limited just to genotype and phenotype. There's a whole bunch of things that are interesting to tie together, and especially that people part. So as you're collecting interesting ideas and interesting bits of science, be collecting those interesting people. They are absolutely going to be a huge tool that you can leverage. With our product concepts, kind of your day-to-day ones, they're based on your geography. If you're located in Canal, Washington, you're going to breed for the West Coast. That's just what it is. Usually there are multiple within a breeding program, so when you're thinking about how to allocate your resources out, be thinking about the geography and what is needed there, and basically your return on investment of those dollars. It is constantly evolving, which makes it interesting. Be ready for that phone call. It's going to come. After you've established that rapport, like for me with the sales force, some days you're going to get that phone call and it's going to say, you better come look at this. And that is when you get to have some fun with it. So with that, I think this is my last slide, and I would be happy to answer any questions that are out there.
Thank you for that great talk to really just kind of lay the process out and see a little bit into your mindset of what you're looking at from the larger perspective, and really bringing the whole focus here. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, you gave me an open topic. So.
Thank you. So with that, do we have any questions for Jessie? I'm really curious, what are you doing now as a breeder for that little orange worm?
Yeah, so actually that was a good one about leveraging in the network. So we called like Aaron Hodgson here at Iowa State, the entomologist. Called Justin McBecken was the entomologist out with the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and they come out and they said, "You got little orange worms in your beans." Yes, I know we do. So we actually work with them through a process to get it identified. We now know it's an insect. We know what species it is. We got it placed there. And then it was about leveraging into that network. I call their crop protection folks. Does anybody know, can we spray anything? Is there a label for this type of stuff? We did a bunch of gathering in information from our sales reps that type of damage in their plots. Maybe there was a cultural thing, maybe maybe tillage disturbs, maybe planting date is helpful to get rid of it. And then I went to wheat. So I'm not sure. They're still working on it though. It is not solved. If anybody wants to solve it, by all means, reach out. We would glad to love to help. So.
You mentioned drones as one of the intermediates for your maybe answer. What applications have you personally applied with drones to phenotype or worked into that process?
Sure. So drones for us, so I'm going to talk about soybeans and wheat because that's what I know the most about. So we have deployed drones on all crops though. So I'm just going to talk about soybeans and wheat because that's what I know most about. So there's a couple ways to use our drones. One is to make yourself more efficient. So things like plant stand, or what we call, in wheat, we don't do plant stand because there's just thousands of them little buggers in a plot and they're touching, so there's no way to count them. So we do something called a plot score. So it's that early season look, removing the breeder's bias about, is it a good plot or is it a bad plot? And while that sounds like a very mundane use of a technology, oh man, does that improve your data. So things like that can absolutely improve your data. We also do things like I showed maturity with soybeans. So we do all of our soybean maturity via drone now. And I'm sure no one in this room has ever done it, but sometimes you have like your favorite line or your favorite pedigrees and you're like, well, it's supposed to be a maturity 3-1. So, the other 3-1s are maturing today. So I'm going to score this one today too. Drones, you fly it and they're like, I don't care if it's your favorite line for whatever reason, Jess, it's 3 days late in that environment. So soybean maturity, we do things like plant height, heading date in wheat. There's been some different applications that we've been using it for, learning more all the time. But a lot of them, yeah, it's learning new information, making yourself more efficient. And then for us, it solved a lot of ergonomic things too, because we don't have like kids out in the field with plant height sticks anymore. That solved a lot of our ergonomic types of things as well. So there's a vast way that we've been using them.
Thanks for the good talk. At your position, I want to believe that the people are really important in your team. And so what criteria do you use in selecting the people as you gather your team?
Ooh, I wasn't anticipating that question today. So the biggest criteria that I use when selecting people is, well, there's two things kind of concurrently. One, do I think they're going to work well with my team? Because you can be the most brilliant person in the world, but if you have something that for whatever reason you're not going to mesh with the team, then you're a really brilliant person all by yourself. That's not always super helpful. So we look for great people, like from a personality set, that are used to like a team setting, used to working in a large kind of group setting, as well as people who just kind of know how to think about things. Because a lot of what we do, it's about critically evaluating an issue, whatever that issue may be, and then coming up with ways to solve it. And I think that's what a lot of your training in grad school, hopefully, there's a lot of that encompassed. How do you critically think through issues? And then how do you work to solve them? So those are kind of the two big skills, would be people skills, working in that team environment, and then the critical thinking skills as well. Because a lot of, at least y'all might be different, but a lot of what I learned in grad school, oh man, that's so out of date. But I knew it really well when I graduated, and it absolutely helped me get that first job, but goodness to sakes, the technology is so much different now. So critical thinking and good people skills.
Great questions. Really appreciate that. Dr. Alt, we really appreciate you for coming and spending time with us here today. Thanks for using some of your valuable time for us. And just want to give this as a thank you and a token of our appreciation.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much. Really
Awesome.
Appreciate your time here. Let's give her one more round of applause.